Hi everybody. In this video, I'm going to show you what you need to do for research report number 1 using SPSS. SPSS is a professional grade statistical software package. It's kind of like Excel on steroids. It's really very powerful. Let's go ahead and get started. Let's click on the project info section of our course website. If you scroll down just a little bit, you'll see the information for research report number 1. There is an example research report. We'll look at that in a second. There are some step-by-step instructions. We'll follow that along all the way through this video. And there's also a grading rubric. It's smart to look at that very closely so you understand how you're being graded and what you're being graded on. Let's first take a look at a sample report just so you have a sense of where you're going with this project. This particular report was written by 2 students, Lindsay and Clarice, and they did a great job. You can use this research report as a guide just so you have a sense of what you need to do. Now, make sure you don't plagiarize from this report. You still need to do all of your own work. However, they formatted it in a really good way, so you should copy that format. Let me point out a couple things. I'll show you in a second that the instructions have 8 different parts, and each part has some subsections. You'll see that as they worked on their report, they labeled each part. Part 1, Section A, Section B, and so forth. You will want to letter and number your report in the same way so that you know exactly where all of your information is and I can find your information very easily. You can see that they've pasted in graphics from their SPSS output. You'll need to do that. I'll show you how. You can see that the report is formatted really nicely. It's easy to read. That's exactly what we're looking for. But for now, let's go ahead and look at those instructions and get started. These are the instructions for research report number 1. You should print them out so you have them easily available. This first part right here talks about the SPSS project that we're working on and how it's described in the homework packet. If you want to use the homework packet to walk through this project, you're welcome to do so. But this video will give you basically all of the information that you need. So let's scroll down a little bit and look at the basic instructions. It says, for this project, you will collect data on a group difference, and then you will compute descriptive statistics using SPSS and the skills that you've learned in class. For example, you might want to investigate gender differences, like males versus females, or you might want to look at class differences, freshmen versus seniors. Bottom line is you need to pick 2 groups to compare. In the example that I'm going to share with you, I'm going to be comparing males and females. That will be my independent variable. That's my grouping variable. Once you select 2 groups to compare, then you need to find a dependent variable. That's the important thing that you're actually measuring to see if there are differences between these 2 groups. So, for example, you might want to see if males and females differ based on the average number of text messages they send per day. That's what I did in my example. You'll want to pick another topic. Now, this is important. You don't want to ask just any question. You need the right type of data. And if you pick the right type of data, you'll be able to use that data not only in research report number 1, but also in research report number 2. So be sure to select a dependent variable that is quantitative in nature and is measured on an interval or ratio level scale. Let's talk about my example real quickly of my dependent variable. I'm looking at the average number of text messages that students send per day. The data that I get from asking that question will clearly be measurement data. It will be quantitative in nature because people will tell me a number. They send 50 text messages per day or maybe 100 text messages per day. And it is interval or ratio. In fact, it's a ratio scale data because when we're looking at text messages, 0 really does mean no text messages sent per day. And the differences along the number line from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 are all equal. So I have equal intervals and a true 0 point that is a ratio level scale. When you select a topic, be sure that it's not too sensitive in nature. Remember, you're just a novice researcher. You don't want to get in over your head. You don't want to upset people. So avoid questions that have to do with sexual behavior, substance abuse, criminal activity, things like that. So use good judgment when you're picking a topic. And then you're going to want to collect data from 15 people in each group. I'm collecting data from men and women, so I need 15 men and 15 women. You want exactly 15 in each group. Because I'm kind of an organizational freak, this is how I collected my data. I made a chart using Excel for men and women, and I numbered 1 to 15 for each group. And then as I scroll down, you can see that's the question that I asked every person. On average, how many text messages do you send per day? As people gave me their answers, I simply listed their answers on that sheet in the appropriate column. For this project, you can collect data really any way that you want. It's much more important that we get the data. I'm not so concerned with how you get the data. So some people will just go up to people face to face at school in the hallways and ask them these questions. Some people will collect that data on social media. Some people will email their friends. Any way you want to collect the data, as long as you're not causing a disturbance, is fine with me. I recommend that you collect that data as quickly as possible, because that way you can get started on the analyses very quickly, and then you can write up the report and be done on time. So let's go ahead and assume that we've collected all the data. Let me show you now how to use SPSS. SPSS should be loaded in public computer labs across the different campuses. It's smart to call ahead and make sure that SPSS is actually loaded on those computers and you know where those computers are. In order to open up SPSS, go to your Start menu and then scroll down and look for I. SPSS is owned by IBM. So right here I have IBM SPSS Statistics 27. You might be on a computer that has a different version. That's fine. Open up that folder, and now I'm going to click on IBM SPSS Statistics 27. That will then open up SPSS. When SPSS first opens, you'll get this little welcome screen. From that welcome screen, we can open up files, we can go through tutorials. We don't need to do any of that right now, so you can just go ahead and hit the close button. Okay, this is SPSS, my friends. As you can see, it looks like a spreadsheet. So in that way, it's a lot like Excel, but it's really much more powerful. There are two windows that we're going to use. This is the data editor. This is where we will enter and store all of our data. And then there will also be an output window. That output window will show us the output of all of our statistical analyses. This data window right here has two different views. There's the data view. This is where we will see all of our data. And then there's also the variable view. We first need to go to the variable view because we need to declare what our two variables are. Remember, I collected data from both men and women, so one variable is gender. And then I also asked them how many text messages they send per day. So the second variable is number of text messages. I need to declare that. So I like to use nice short little names to name my variable. So the first one I'm just going to call gender. So I type that in and I hit enter. And you'll see that SPSS automatically populates most of these cells with some basic information. Most of that information is usually right. It's exactly what we need. So for example, that variable will hold numeric information, numbers. This next column shows how much room SPSS will give to the left of the decimal place and to the right of the decimal place. Now in this case, I'm going to be entering whole numbers. So I'm actually going to move that down to 0. You can type that in or you can use these arrows. This part here is really important. This is where I have an opportunity to put a label for the data. If you take the time to label your variables right now, all of your output will be labeled that way and it'll be much easier to read later on. So in this case, again, I'm just going to really write gender of participant, I guess. Just gender would have been fine, but I'm just trying to make my point. So that was just the label for the variable. Right here, I have an opportunity to add value labels. And that's because in SPSS, we don't typically put in words like male or female. We're going to put in numbers to represent those categories. I'm going to put in a 1 for male and a 2 for female. And that's not really anything that's intuitive. So I want to make sure the output is labeled, and I want to make sure that everybody understands which group is which. So I'm going to click on this, and you see the ellipsis, ... click on that, and it gives you the option to stick in a value and then attach a label to that value. So I'm going to put in a 1 whenever I have data from a male. So the label for that, I'm going to type in male, and then I'm going to click right here to add that to my list. So you can see my cursor is blinking up there. It takes me right back up to the top so I can put in another value. Well, the only other group is females, and I'm going to label them with a 2. And then I will label that group female. And then I will add that to my list. Once I have all of the value labels listed, I click OK. So that's all set up. Over here, all this stuff is good. Measurement. Here's where I can tell it which type of measurement scale was used. Nominal, ordinal, interval, or ratio. Interval or ratio level data is often called scale data. This is a nominal variable because we just have names of categories, males and females. Well, that was my independent variable, my grouping variable, gender. Now let's go ahead and enter information about our dependent variable. The dependent variable was the number of text messages the students send per day. I'm just going to call that variable text. When I hit enter, most of that information is already populated. And it's exactly what I want. Numeric 8.2 works well. I'm going to put in a better label. I'm going to call that text messages per day. Text message per day. Now, at this point, I don't need to set up any value labels because the data that I enter will be obvious. If I put in 100, it's obvious it's 100 text messages per day. If I put in 50, it's obvious it's 50 text messages per day. So in this situation, I do not need value labels. Let's move down this way and declare the measurement scale. This is a ratio level scale that I'm using when I ask people how many text messages they send per day. So I'm going to list that as scale. Remember, that includes interval and ratio level data. Okay, my friends, that's what we needed to do to set up the basics for our data file. Now we need to enter the data. And for that, we're going to go back to the data view. So I come over here and I click on this tab. And you can see I now have a column for gender and I have a column for text. From my data sheet, I'm going to start entering my data. I'm going to enter the data for the males first. So here I have a male for that first person. So I'm going to type in a 1. I can hit enter. Do you see how that pulls me down? Another way to work on this, because I actually want to go to the right, is to enter my data. I put in a 1 and then I hit the tab key. That moves me to the right. So in this case, it actually works a little bit better. That first male that I asked said that he sends 20 text messages per day. So I stick in 20, hit enter. I move myself over. Now I'll enter the data for the second male. Again, that's a male. That person sends on average 50 text messages per day. And you're going to want to do this with all of the data from your first group. This next person sends 50 text messages per day. The next male sends 150 text messages per day. Once you've entered the data for that first group, check all of your numbers to make sure that you're right, and then go ahead and enter the data for your second group. In this case, my second group, they would be the females, so I'm going to put in 2. And that first female I talked to, she said that she sent 100 text messages per day. I'm going to go ahead and enter the rest of the data for the females. When you're finished entering your data for your second group, check to make sure all of your numbers are correct, and you should have data now for 30 people overall, 15 per group. At this point, if you haven't already, it's smart to save your file. Remember, we are working on the data file. SPSS will save data files in a .sav format. In other words, all of those data files will end in a .sav. So I'm going to go to the File menu. I'm going to click on Save. And then I'm going to figure out where I want to save this. So I've already worked on some of these projects in the past. I'm just going to call this one RR1 class example. And you can see it's going to list it as a .sav file automatically. Be sure you save that file somewhere where you can find it, like on a flash drive. You're going to want to take that file home with you because then you can open it up again later to do more analyses or to work on research report number 2, whatever it might be. You don't want to have to enter all the data again and then do all the analyses again. You want to save the file. So at this point, I'm going to hit Save. When you save your file, then you're going to be introduced to the second window that we'll be using with SPSS, and that's the output window. And SPSS actually runs a command to save that file, and that command is called save. And this is just showing you the output of that save command. It's simply saying it saved the file. And we don't really need to see this anymore, so I'm going to just click on it to highlight it like I did, and then hit my delete key. My delete key will just make it go away. I'm trying to keep that output window nice and neat so that when we run analyses, the output that we need is right in front of us without anything in our way. If you look at the bottom of your screen, you can hover on the different tabs and you'll see that the SPSS data editor is still there. And then you can click on that output as well. and go from one window to the next. So they're both there. Okay, now that we have SPSS all set up and we've got a data file, let's look at our instructions and see what we need to do. In section 1 of the report, you'll provide a basic introduction. You can look at the sample report to get an idea of how to set it up. Make sure you write in full sentences. Make sure you provide a sufficient amount of information. Think about responding in short paragraphs instead of just short phrases. Most of what I'm asking for in this section is pretty obvious. How and where you collected the data. You can explain that. What factors you controlled and what factors you did not control in your research. That part's not quite as obvious. Let me explain. When I collected my data, I didn't really control much of anything at all. I just looked for men and women, and then I asked them about text messages sent per day. Now, on my campus in Zanesville, nursing is the largest major, and most of those nursing students are females. So most of the students in my sample, the females, they are nurses, and most of the males in my sample are not nurses. So do you see how that's an uncontrolled factor that can influence my interpretation of the results? If I find, for example, that women send more text messages than men, I'm also kind of finding that nursing students are sending more text messages than men. Do you see how that kind of confuses the results? So if there are uncontrolled factors, you want to figure out what they are and then discuss them. Why you decided to study these variables? Please explain more than just, I was interested in knowing what I would find. Why did you study those variables? Why did you find those variables interesting? What did you expect to find? And then also be sure to include a table of your raw data, because theoretically speaking, I should be able to enter all of your data and rerun your analyses to check your analyses. Okay, moving down to part number 2. Those 2 parts I think are relatively straightforward. It's part number 3 where we start to have some fun. So let me show you exactly what we need to do. Using SPSS, construct a frequency distribution table for each group. For this analysis and the remaining analyses, you will need to split your SPSS data file so that your output is divided into 2 groups. You see, I want a frequency distribution for the males and for the females. So let me show you how to split your file so that all of the analyses that we request from SPSS come out 2 different ways, one for the males, one for the females. Here we are back at the data editor. I want to go to the data menu, click that. Go all the way down to where it says split file. Go ahead and click on that, split file. Now, we want to split the file by gender. Remember, I want to have output for males and females. So I'm going to click on the gender variable, and the option that I want right here is the one that says organize output by groups. I'm going to organize the output by gender, male or female. So groups based on gender. Now say OK. Once you do that, that output window will open up and SPSS will run a command. It will sort the cases and then split the file by gender. Again, I don't really need to see that in my output window, so I'm just going to click on it and hit my delete key. My delete key will make that go away. It will keep my output window nice and neat so that we can see the analyses later on. Go back down to the tabs that you see at the bottom of your screen and click on the tab for the data window, the data editor. And you'll see right down here, if you did this correctly, it says split by gender. That's exactly what we want. Now, every single analysis that we do from now on will be split by gender, and we will get output 2 different ways, once for the males, once for the females. That file will remain split until we turn off the split or we close the file. Now that our file is split, we're ready to run an analysis. Let's go back to those instructions one more time. So, of course, we saw for part 3, we need a frequency distribution table on those text messages for the males and the females. We'll look down here for part 4, we need a histogram for each one of those groups, the males and the females, regarding how many text messages they send per day. I'm going to show you that SPSS is really so strong and so flexible, it's going to be able to do both those things in one shot. And in fact, in part 5, for that dependent variable, text messages, we're also going to need the mean, the median, and the mode. And again, we need that for the males and for the females. We have a split file that'll be handled automatically. SPSS is going to be able to do all this stuff together. We also need the range, variance, and standard deviation for each group on that one variable, text messages sent per day. I'm going to be able to get SPSS to do all of those things in one shot. Let's go back to SPSS and do that. When we are ready to analyze the data, virtually everything that we need we will find in the Analyze menu. So click on that. Now as I come on down, I'm just hovering on each one of these options. I have an option for descriptive statistics. That seems like a logical place for us to look right now. Here are the various commands available in the descriptive statistics section. What I want is frequencies. When I click on that, I'm going to see that I have a variety of options. First of all, SPSS needs to know what variable do you want to analyze. Remember, we are analyzing that dependent variable, text messages per day. So I'm going to click on that and then use this arrow to move that variable over into this list of variables to be analyzed. We selected the frequencies subcommand. So by default, there's a check mark over here where it says display frequency tables. In other words, it will create a frequency distribution table for the males and the females for us automatically. I also want a histogram, and I can find that right here where it says charts. So click on charts and then select histogram. Here's something that I like to include. It says show normal curve on the histogram. This way, a normal curve will be superimposed on my histogram, and that will help me determine if my histogram is normally distributed or maybe it's skewed. Go ahead and click Continue. Now click on Statistics, because here are the various options that we can ask for in terms of statistical analyses. Remember, we need the mean, the median, and the mode. Those are measures of central tendency. And we also needed some measures of dispersion, in other words, measures of variability. We needed the range, the variance, and the standard deviation. So you see, almost everything that we need for this research project, we're going to be able to get in one data run. I'm going to click Continue, and now the only thing I need to do to run that is to click OK. Once I hit OK, my output window will open up and it will show me the analyses that I've requested. Click OK. All right, in the blink of an eye, SPSS did all of these analyses. Scroll and make sure you're up at the very top. You can see these are the commands that it actually ran. And some people actually type out those commands. We don't do that in our class. So if you want, you can click on that and delete it just to clean up your output window. This is showing what data set it came from. I'm going to click on that and delete it just to clean up my data window. And right here it says gender participant male. So first, remember, we split that file. First, it's going to show me the output for the males. And here I have the mean, the median, the mode, standard deviation, variance, and range, all in one little table. So I got a ton of information right there. I scroll down a little bit. Here it says it's for the males. Here is a frequency distribution table. And then here I have a histogram. And you can see that that normal distribution is superimposed on that histogram. So my data is not normally distributed. It's not all that far off, but it's not perfectly normally distributed. And we wouldn't expect that when we collect data from just 15 people in a group. Let's go down just a little bit more. Here now it says gender of participant females. So all of those analyses are now being performed for females. Here's that table with all of the basic descriptive statistics: mean, median, mode, standard deviation, variance, and range. Let's just compute the means real quickly. The females on average sent 111 text messages per day. I'm going to scroll back up and look at it for the males. The males on average sent only about 79 text messages per day. So at least descriptively speaking, the females are sending more text messages than males. Let's scroll down, look at those females a little bit more closely. Here is a frequency distribution table for those females. You see it's based on just 15 people, the 15 females, and here is a distribution of that data. Now that's clearly not normally distributed. When I look at it, I can see that that distribution is starting to form a positive skew. Let's go back and look at our instructions. You can see in each section, section 3, section 4, 5, and 6, each one says include the output tables in your report. Include the histogram in your report. We need to include the mean, median, and mode in our report. We need to include all this stuff in our report. Let me show you an easy way to copy that data, copy that output, and put it in our report. So I'm going to go back to the output window. I'm going to scroll all the way back up to the top, just start with these males. And then if I want to include this table in my report, and I suggest that you do, I'm going to click on it to highlight it, and then I'm going to right click on it using my right mouse button. And I want to copy it, but look at this right here. It says copy as, and here's a little tip. I recommend that you copy it as an image. So click on image. And the reason I recommend that is because when you paste that table into Word, it will paste it as essentially a picture. And then it makes it really easy to resize it, bigger or smaller. If you paste it as it is right there in SPSS, it will paste it into Word as a table. And then if you wanted to work on it, make it bigger or smaller, move it around, it's much more difficult to navigate that with a table. So now I'm going to go into Word and show you how to paste it in. When you work on your research report, you should do it in a Word document. I want to paste that in right now. So I'm going to go to my paste menu, and usually what I like to do is hit paste special. I'm going to paste it in as a picture. I want to make sure that it understands it's a picture. So let me show you that one more time. Right over here where there are pasting options, I hit the down arrow and I select paste special. And I want to paste it in as a picture. PNG is fine, or JPEG. I usually use JPEG. Click OK. And now it pasted it in. And when you click on it, you can see it's really just one picture. I can make it smaller. I can make it larger. It makes it very easy to use in my report. Let's go back to our SPSS output window, and I'll give you one more example. So scroll down. Here's our frequency distribution table. You can click on it to activate it. Right click on it, say copy as, and in this case, again, I would say image. Scroll down, here's the histogram. Click on it just to kind of activate it. Right click, say copy as, image. Let's copy that one. I'm going to go back into Word. Here I am back in Word, back in our research report. I'm just going to put in a couple blank spaces, and now I'm going to paste in that histogram. Remember, I said that I usually like to hit paste special just to make it clear that I'm pasting it in as a JPEG, but you often don't really need to do that. You can just hit paste. And because we copied it as an image file, it will typically paste it in as an image file. And when I click on that, I can see it just sees it as this one big image. And I can go up to the corner and resize it. And that makes it really easy to work with. So that's a tip that I think you should follow. All right, let's go back to our instructions and see what we need to do next. We are up to part 7. It says, using SPSS, create a Z distribution for each group. In your report, include a table showing your raw scores and the corresponding Z-scores. I'll show you how you can do that. What raw score best corresponds to the top 20%? That would be the 80th percentile for each distribution. And then also, what raw score best corresponds to the 30th percentile? So that's the lower 30% of the distribution. All right, I'll show you how to do those as well. Let's go back to our SPSS data file. Here we are back at our data file. Remember that data file is split by gender, and that's good. That's exactly what we want. Because I want SPSS to take all of these values right here for the males and then transform those values into Z-scores. And then I want it to take all these values for the females and transform those values separately into Z-scores. Because remember, each one of those groups has a different mean and a different standard deviation. And that's how we transform raw scores into Z-scores. We can do it really quickly. I'm going to have SPSS create a new column that will show the Z-scores. This is how we do it. Click on the Analyze column, and then go ahead and click on Descriptive Statistics, or you can just hover, and you'll see your options. The option that we need is Descriptives. Click on that. When you click on that, you're going to want to click this box right here. It says Save Standardized Values as Variables. You might recall that a Z-score is a standardized score. So what that's really doing, it's going to save Z-scores as a new variable. And that's what we want to do. Now SPSS needs to know, of these variables, which variables do you want me to compute Z-scores for? We just need it on that dependent variable, text messages per day. Now, by default, SPSS will also compute some basic descriptive statistics for us, like the mean and the standard deviation. We don't really need it. We already have it, but that's fine. The key reason why we're running this right now is so that we can get Z-scores. So go ahead and click OK. Remember, anytime you run an analysis, your output window is going to open up, and here you will have the results of that analysis. Here's a nice little table of descriptive statistics for the males, and here's the same type of table for the females. But what I really want are those z-scores. So let's go back to that data editor. Here I am back at the data editor, and you'll see I have a new variable, a new column. It's labeled Z text. So the variable is text messages, and these are z-scores for that variable. That's exactly what I needed. Let's go back to those instructions and see what they were asking about for the 80th percentile and 30th percentile. Let's look at that one more time. This instruction says what raw score best corresponds to the top 20%, which would be the 80th percentile for each distribution. So here I am back in my SPSS data editor. I'm just going to highlight the data for the men because I just want to look at this one group at a time. I want to find the z-score that shows me the value closest to the 80th percentile. Well, which z-score is closest to the 80th percentile? For that, we need to look at a z-table. Let's look at that real quickly. Here's a copy of our handy-dandy z-table. If I want to find the 80th percentile, I'm trying to find the z-score that cuts off 80% of the distribution down here from 20% of the distribution up here. So I'm going to look through that list of z-values, and I'm going to try to find the z-score that shows me 20% in the tail, 20% in the smaller portion. So let's just start scrolling down. And I'm looking at this column right here where it says smaller portion. And you can see that these values are going down. I'm looking for the closest thing to 20%, 0.20. So I need to come over here. Here I see 0.2005. That's really close. It's only off by 5/10,000ths. Here's 0.1977. That's off by 23/10,000ths. I can do that pretty easily in my head, but I know not everybody can. Just use a calculator. Take 0.2005 and subtract 0.2. Take 0.1977 and subtract 0.2. Which one is closest? You'll see this one is closest. Well, this corresponds to the closest z-score we have to the 80th percentile, the top 20%. That z-score is positive 0.84. I want to go back now and look at my data and find the closest z-score to 0.84. When I find the closest z-score to 0.84, that's going to show me the raw score value that's closest to the 80th percentile. So let's remember that, 0.84. Let's go back to the SPSS data window. Let's find the closest z-score to 0.84. These are negative values, they're not close to 0.84. 1.74, 0.52, so far 0.52 is the closest thing to 0.84. Let's see if anything is closer. I think 0.52 is the closest thing. Several of these values are equal to 0.52. That value in terms of text messages is 100. So 100 text messages is equivalent to the 80th percentile. Back to our instructions. Of course, you'll want to do that for each distribution. We just did it for the males. You'll want to do the same thing for the females and find the closest raw score value that corresponds to the 80th percentile. The next thing we need to do is find the raw score that best corresponds to the 30th percentile. So let's check our z-table and figure out what z-value corresponds best with the 30th percentile. Here we are back at the z-distribution. Keep in mind the 50th percentile is right in the middle. That's a z-score of 0. So the 30th percentile needs to be down here. That's where negative z-values are. Keep that in mind. I want to figure out where there's going to be 30% in the tail. So I'm going to go down this column, the smaller portion, the portion in the tail, and find the closest thing to 30%, 0.30. So let's scroll down. Actually, over here, we're getting pretty close already. Here's 0.3015. Here's 0.2981. 0.3015 is 15/10,000ths away from 0.30. 0.2981 is 19/10,000ths away from 0.30. So this would be closer. So the z-score that is closest to the 30th percentile would be a z-score of negative 0.52. Remember, in this distribution, negative values aren't listed. We just need to know that when we're talking about the left side of the distribution, we should make that z-score negative. So it is negative 0.52. I now want to go back to my data, and for each distribution, I want to find the z-score closest to negative 0.52. That will show me the data value that is closest to the 30th percentile. Here we are back at our data editor. I have the data highlighted again for the males only. I'm trying to find the closest thing to a z-score of negative 0.52. This negative 0.70 is pretty close. As I scroll down, I see positive 0.52. That's not what I'm looking for. As I scroll down, here I see negative 0.45. So that's pretty darn close to negative 0.52. Right now, that looks like our closest value. So here is the z-score closest to the 30th percentile. So what raw score, what score in terms of text messages is closest to the 30th percentile? 60 text messages per day. So that's how you will respond to those questions. And of course, you need to do that separately for the males and the females. Let's go back to our instructions. In Part 7, the instructions say, in your report, include a table showing your raw scores and the corresponding z-values. Remember, that's exactly what we have in our data editor right now. So it would be nice if we can just copy the data from our data editor and put it into our Word document. Let me show you how to do that. I would highlight the data I want to copy. I'm just going to highlight the males for right now because I have limited space on my screen. And then I want to copy it. I like to hit Control-C to copy things, but of course you can also go up to the Edit menu and hit Copy. You see Control-C is the hotkey. I'll click on that again. So now that should be in memory. I'm going to go to my Word document now. I'm going to go to my report. Here I am, back in my report. If I want to paste that in, let's just go ahead and click Paste and see what happens. You can see it pasted in, and it doesn't necessarily look real nice, but it shows that these are the males, that's group 1, 20 text messages per day, and that corresponds to a z-score of negative 1.4. So all of the information is there. You might want to clean it up so it looks a little bit better. Let me show you one more technique that might allow you to paste in something that just looks, I think, really nice. I'm going to undo what I did right there by hitting Control-Z, and I'm going to go back to my SPSS data editor. I'm just going to click somewhere else on my spreadsheet to turn off that highlighting. And then from my main menu, from my Windows menu, I'm going to try to find that snipping tool. In fact, I'm just going to start typing in snip. Here is the snip and sketch tool. When I click on that, I can say I want a new snip. And at this point, I can highlight within my data file exactly what I want to copy. That's what they mean by snipping. So I want to take a little snip out of that window. So I highlight that. And now I can hit Control-C to copy that. Control-C to copy. I don't need that snipping tool open anymore, so I'm going to close it. And now I'm going to go into my Word document that has my research report. And then I'm going to paste it in. Let's just hit Paste and see what happens. And there it pastes it in again as a picture. And I like pasting things in as a picture because then I can really easily make it bigger or smaller, and I can really easily move it around. Let's go back to our instructions and then finish up. In Part 8, you need to summarize your project. So overall, what does all the data tell you? What is the story of the data? In your summary, make sure you address the factors that you were able to control, the factors that you weren't able to control, because of course those factors have a big influence on how you interpret the data. Make sure you provide some conclusions. So you should have a good, strong paragraph in there. Again, look at the sample report to get an idea of what I'm looking for. And then finally, take a look at the grading rubric. This is the grading rubric for research report number 1. And you can see every little thing that I ask you to do is associated with 1 point or half a point, sometimes even 1/4 of a point. In reality, it's kind of ridiculous, but every little thing I ask you to do is associated with points. So make sure you do all of those little things. If you do all of those little things and you do it well, you'll end up with 15 out of 15 points. If you skip something, I'll have to give you 0 for that particular section, so please don't do that. So this grading rubric is smart to pull out when you're working on your report to make sure you have all of your bases covered. And finally, let's take one last look at the instructions. I have some miscellaneous instructions at the end. I'm just reminding you to number and letter each of your responses in your report so that they are easy for you to find and they're easy for me to find. You'll need to submit your SPSS data file along with your report, and you'll do that on Blackboard. I'll show you that in 1 minute. It really is smart to work with others. You can do this as a small group. 2 or 3 people in a group would be ideal. Please consider working with other people. I guarantee you your project will turn out much stronger if you have some support from other students, if you can talk it out. Let's go back to Blackboard real fast, and I'll show you how to submit your completed report. By the due date, you will want to submit your research report, which will be in Word or PDF format, and then also your SPSS data file. That should be in .sav format. You will want to submit both of those files via Blackboard right here. If you click on where it says Research Report Number 1, this section will open up and it will give you an opportunity to browse your computer and find those files and then attach those files so that I can see them in your grade center on Blackboard. If you have any questions about this project, you can email me. Remember, of course, you can also email the tutors, and you can simply talk to other students in our class. I encourage you to work together. So good luck on the project. I'm really looking forward to reading them. Take care. I'll see you in the next video.